Yo, what is crack-a-lackin'? And welcome to episode 12 of the Back of the End Zone podcast. I'm Josh Reisek here with Brian Kleski, and we are ready to get freaking going right now.
Oh yeah.
I'm excited right now. I know Bryant may not be too excited because this week, back-to-back weeks, not talking about an SEC school. This week, we're talking about the
Hey,
Penn
I mean,
State Nittany Lions, and it's going to be an interesting season for Penn State. Every year is an interesting season for them, but I
Penn
mean,
and last week we talked about Michigan, a blue blood. Well, Penn State's another blue blood. Other than the stuff that happened in the early 2010s with the whole investigation stuff, Penn State has been a pretty good program for you know as long as college football's been around. Penn State always seems to be in the mix before the season starts. They get going, they start off pretty strong, and then once they get into the thick of the division, playing Ohio State and Michigan, they can seem to beat one of them, but they can't seem to beat both of them and get to the Big Ten title as much as they want to. They've gotten to it a couple times because I remember, but I mean that division is tough. But I mean, recruiting wise, they're still really good. Their brand and name speaks for themselves.
they're
Penn
always at the
State,
top of the Big Ten. I mean, not always at the top of the Big Ten, but they're up there with Michigan and Ohio State every year. They're always competing, getting those recruits. And speaking of those recruits, this is going to be the first year since 2017 that Penn State is not going to see Sean Clifford in a Penn State uniform at the
that's
start of.
right.
So, and I mean, we just talked about this. They have Drew Allar, who's coming in. He was featured in a couple games last year, got quite a few pass attempts and rushing attempts kind of thrown in the mix in between a couple games as a true freshman. But he was a five-star quarterback. Was the fourth best quarterback in the class of 2022. And if Penn State wants to win games, I mean, the big games, especially under James Franklin, this is their guy. I mean,
Yeah.
oh, dude, he's 6'5", 240 something pounds. That's a big, bulky quarterback.
And
Like,
you've seen it too, And Penn State at one point did have Will Levis. Now they chose Sean Clifford over Will Levis. But I mean, it all come down to him with Penn State. I don't get me wrong about this. I don't know that much about Penn State. This is more your area, but it depends on if they have the weapons on offense for him to to throw to give him some room to operate. I know Penn State's always had a great offensive line, but yeah, we're gonna talk about some Penn State, man, and this. And a lot of you have probably already seen this list, but this list that ESPN pushed out, the top 25 quarterbacks of the 2000s, a lot of these, it's questionable for sure, especially who they have at number one. But I like a lot of these names on these lists. On this list, there's a couple guys I think should be on there, a couple guys that I think shouldn't be on there. But I like this list. But we're gonna talk about that. And speaking of big things for this podcast coming forward, we have landed two sponsors locally around, Mobile, Alabama, and where I live in Jackson, Alabama. One of them being 251 Pool Works from Mobile. They work in the, Mobile, Pensacola, Bay Minette area. Some in
County.
some in like in that area. The guy who runs it, his name is William Waldrop. He I've seen pictures of what they do. It's fantastic, and we're glad to have them on. And then I know our other sponsor is Now Fitness from Groveville, Alabama, where I'm from, Jackson, Groveville, Clark County. They just opened up maybe a year or two ago. They're really good. I've seen them. I've seen videos of them training. They do CrossFit, personal sessions. They also train. Some of the high school teams around the area. They got some big guys coming through Jackson, Alabama that are in a few years we'll be talking about these guys. Like one guy for sure that you'll be hearing a lot of, especially down here, in our area. Landon Duckworth, Jackson, Alabama, from Jackson High School. They train him. He's gotten a lot of offers. He's a fret. Well, he's fixing to be a sophomore. But anyway, with those two sponsors, we're glad to have them aboard, man. It's gonna be. We hope to help them grow just as much as we are hoping to grow. And man, it's gonna be fun. I'll drop their links to their content below. We'll have their logos in the background. Contact information. So yeah, we're ready to get this thing rocking.
one of the first things that I kind of want to dive right into is we kind of already touched base on it a little bit, but Drew Aller for Penn State, because I know you don't really watch Big Ten ball that much,
I
but
do. I mean,
I mean,
I pay attention to it more than outside of SEC. Big Ten is probably what I watch the most because those are probably the biggest threats to the SEC when it comes to playoff time. But we've seen
and
how
Penn
that's played out. But Drew
always,
Aller, yeah, 5-star quarterback, fourth overall in his class of 2022.
and I mean, last year I wouldn't necessarily say split snaps with Sean Clifford, but he saw action in like 10 games. May have not been 10 games, but it was 9 or 10 games where he saw action, and every game he got in was able to probably throw between 7 to 10 pass attempts, had a couple rushing attempts here and there, and he was solid. He was solid. I'm pretty sure he passed around 60%, threw for a couple hundred yards, 300 something yards, and a couple touchdowns. But he is the future of Penn State. Like, as a Penn State, he's someone to be excited about. He's someone that Ohio State missed out on. He's from Ohio, from Medina High School, and he's Penn State's guy. I mean, and it's someone to me look forward to, because he's not your stereotypical like Penn State kind of quarterback. Because Sean Clifford was Sean Clifford. I mean, I don't want to crap on him, but he was always the guy that always, and I mean, it wasn't just him, but he was always one of those guys that always came up short in those big time games where they were like, when they were ranked number 2 playing number 6 Ohio State, and all these times where they literally had it in the bag and just came up short. And I mean, it's always seemed to happen. Like, you look at the quarterback before Sean Clifford, it was Trace McSorley, who, and there's that one TikTok song about him, like balling like Trace McSorley or whatever. I know he's a backup, but it's like they really haven't had a quarterback recruit like Drew Aller, and he's definitely a guy that's going to come in if he can utilize the offensive weapons the right way. And I know we were talking about that, how you said you don't really know much about Penn State's offense. They do have a returning running back starter. They have a couple guys, but they have Nick Singleton, the running back last, rushed for 1,000 yards. He's like, the Big Ten East has running back. They have good running backs. And I mean, that's where Penn State has always been known, to run it up your freaking throat. Like
Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders.
Exactly. Some of the better running backs in the league came out of Penn State. And
I actually have an autographed picture of Saquon Barkley while at Penn State. So
yeah, but I mean,
I'm a huge Saquon Barkley fan.
Yeah, and it's just crazy too, because Nick Singleton was a freshman last year, rushed for 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. Like, I mean, the ceiling is really high right now for Penn State. Looking at how much potential that their school has, and just to me, the main thing as a Big Ten fan is Penn State just always falls short. And like the big defining moments, like the moments where they could be a playoff team or a Big Ten champion, they fall short right there. And we were just talking about it. Like, it's something where, and I know Penn State fans know this, and just about every college football fan knows this, but like, James Franklin needs to switch something up going into this upcoming year with a fresh start with a new quarterback, a really young roster. Like, yeah, they lost some guys like Joey Porter Jr. and a couple other key pieces to their team, the draft, but James Franklin needs to switch something, and it starts with that quarterback, Drew Aller. And
James Franklin seems to be a guy, and you talk to people, or you have discussions with fans online and stuff like that. Like, you like talking about which coaches are on the hot seat. I hate to say it, but like James Franklin, kind of a little bit on the hot seat, because it seems like you said, he underachieves year in and year out. And with the talent that he does get, I mean, let's not sit here and act like Penn State doesn't recruit well. I mean, I was looking at their last few recruiting classes. They're sitting at 7 right now in 2024. They finished 13 last year, and they finished top 6 the year in 2022 with that 5-star quarterback recruit and some other guys. That I know last year they flipped a kid that was committed to Bama, Elliott Washington, who was a safety. I mean, they recruit well. I mean, Penn State's like, there are some schools that have the brand name and have the just the recognition that they have. Like when we talked about LSU a couple weeks back, their brand LSU speaks for itself. Penn State the same way. I mean, so they'll always recruit well. So it's not like Penn State doesn't recruit well. They have the recruiting classes. Now, I would like to see them go more, recruit more, better as far as wide receivers go. Now, they did have Jahan Dotson.
Yeah, but like thinking about it too, we were talking about this before too. Like, their recruiting has always been good, and like look at their NFL stars. Like, we were just talking about Saquon Barkley Like, think about some like receivers like KJ Hamler, Chris Godwin, Allen
Jahan
Robinson.
Dotson.
Yeah. Like, then they have Micah Parsons on the defensive end. Like, yeah, Jahan Dotson too. Like, they really do have high caliber players coming out year after year that are high draft picks. Like, literally every single year they have guys that
Yeah. Joey Porter
coming
Jr. this year, man.
exactly. And defensively, like, that's where I would want to be in the Big Ten, because really every single year Penn State gets really good. Like the Bears, for example, being a Bears fan, they drafted Jaquan Brisker last year with a second round draft pick, and he's a phenomenal corner and
Yeah.
phenomenal. But like this upcoming year, they have Adisa Isaac coming back, who's a defensive end, and he was a stellar defensive end. He sat out in 2020. Well, he was injured in 2021, came back last year, had a handful of sacks, quite a few tackles for losses, and a ton of tackles. And like, he's like a type of guy that I wouldn't say could turn into a Will Anderson, but he's a solid defensive end that will be a solid pass rusher in the NFL one day. But it's just, will those pieces be beneficial towards beating teams like Michigan, Ohio State, and even Michigan State? Michigan State's on the decline. Mel Tucker's definitely on the hot
I wouldn't
seat.
say all that just because
I mean, I still
we'll get to Michigan State later, but no, yeah, like you said, like they have all this high end talent that they've acquired over the last few years, but it doesn't seem like they've been able to take a season and put it all together. Like I always use 2019 LSU as this kind of example of putting it all together, even if it's just for one season. I mean, LSU always has amazing talent. LSU always acquires talent. And before that 2019 championship, they were kind of Penn State, where they'd have all this talent. They'd have, they were LSU, but they'd always fall short when it came to beating Bama or maybe beating Auburn or they'd fall short in some way. And so, but then in 2019, it seemed like they cultivated all that talent together with Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, especially on offense, Joe Burrow. Offensive line was stellar. The defense came on strong at the end of the year with Derek Stingley and other guys, Patrick Queen, Clavon Chason. So I view Penn State as like the LSU of the Big Ten East, where like sometimes there are some years where they have all the talent, but it doesn't seem like they can put it all together. And so
exactly, because they're playing teams like Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State every single year. Like,
yeah,
like we were just saying, like going back to the James Franklin talk, in his 9 years at Penn State, he's had 4 11-win seasons. Like,
he can win games.
Exactly. He's really only had one bad year, and that was the COVID year, which was the only year he was below 500. But that's also when the Big Ten only played like 8 conference games, so that he kind of couldn't really do much about that. And it's just lots of people sitting out and whatnot. But 4 11-win seasons, like the Penn State fan, that's something to be happy about. But it's also just like we were saying, like it's at a point where you're really questioning, should they continue out with James Franklin, or is he really gonna get them past those big time games? Because at this point he hasn't seemed to do it yet, and this year is going to be crucial for him winning those big time games.
And Penn State can win big games. I saw a Penn State team last year they were good. They won the Rose Bowl, and but they weren't as good as some of the other teams in the Big Ten. They went into Auburn, which granted Auburn was what they were last year, but Auburn and Jordan Hare is always a very intense environment, especially being down here in the SEC. Auburn is probably one of the best or most intimidating atmospheres in college football. And they went to Auburn and just fucking demolished them. And so, and Penn State themselves has probably arguably the best atmosphere in college football. Beaver Stadium, the whiteout. I've always wanted to go to a whiteout game, man. I mean, so that's on my bucket list.
Yeah, that would be insane. But it's just like what do you do at this point? And that's why to me, I'm like, yeah, they brought in Drew Aller. They got a couple transfers. I know they got a wide receiver transfer from Kent State, a couple other guys, but it's like, it's at the point where this could potentially be like James Franklin might not be at Penn State too much longer.
Yeah. If they underachieve this year, I feel like that seat's only getting hotter.
And it literally, and I'm like, I don't want to say they underachieved last year, because by all means they didn't. They won the Rose Bowl. They beat the Pac-12 champions, Utah, who beat USC, and they won big games last year. But it's just like, for Big Ten standards and for Penn State standards, they should be winning the games against Ohio State in Michigan. And as a Penn State fan, you want to win those games. Like,
And last year they both time when they played Michigan and Ohio State, they led in both those games at some point.
and
I remember, I remember like, especially the Ohio State one. I remember like, oh, is Penn State going to beat Ohio State? Like, and like I remember watching that. And I'm like, well, if Penn State could have held on both those games, I mean, maybe Penn State's the team in the playoff from the Big Ten. I
if
mean,
it weren't for JT Tomenlaw for Ohio State, who had the pick six and the fumble recovery,
I remember that.
would have been a completely different game. Because I mean, Ohio State ended up holding on, winning by like 13 points. But that whole entire game, I was sitting there like, I was like, what the heck's gonna happen? I was so scared. I was like, I cannot lose to Sean Clifford. Like it was scary. But I mean, Penn State just so happened to just fall short, and they fell really short in the Michigan game.
Yeah.
But it's just like, in this year, looking at their schedule, Michigan comes to Beaver Stadium. That's probably going to be a whiteout game. Like, more than likely, thinking about it, I mean, a lot of people tend to say that Penn State sometimes will schedule their whiteout games for crappy opponents. But thinking about it, Michigan coming in, former number 2 seed this past year, right? Yeah, number 2 seed.
Back-to-back Big Ten champions.
Exactly. They're going to have a whiteout game that game. And for Michigan, like, Harbaugh is going to have to come out punching the crap, because it's the hardest environment, one of the hardest Big Ten environment, I would say, to win in. Even as an Ohio State, I think it's a harder environment to win in than the Big House. So,
And that their schedule, I've looked at it. It's not that bad. Like, it's not, it's very manageable. They have West Virginia at home. They go to Illinois, which Illinois has always been kind of a pain in the butt to them, because I remember a couple years ago they went to like 9 overtimes, and then last year I remember Illinois beating them. Then Iowa, they have Iowa at home, which Iowa, be what they are. They still have a great defense.
and they got Keith McNamara from Michigan. So, I mean, that's.
Then they go. I think their toughest game might not even be Michigan. It might be at Ohio State, and I think it's going to be either. It's going to be probably at Ohio State. Probably their toughest game. And I think, but then they have Michigan at home, and they go to Michigan State, and so I mean, it is what it is for Penn State. I think their schedule is very manageable. Because I mean, outside of West Virginia, they're out of a conference is kind of crappy. But I mean, that's
like Delaware or whoever.
But I mean, everybody has cupcakes in their schedule, so I mean, I'm not too worried about that. Like I said, I think their toughest game was at Ohio State, October 21st. I feel like that's the game to watch for them. I think they have a real chance of beating Michigan November 11th when Michigan comes into town.
Exactly.
I don't think that's their whiteout game, because that game's a big noon kickoff.
Yeah, never mind.
But I mean, but still though, I mean that could be a whiteout game, but who knows? But
yeah, but still just a crazy environment, and it's like, yeah, it'll be. Like, it's just one of those teams where it's like every single year, like, they could really be good. Like, Penn State could win the Big Ten this year.
Yeah,
they probably won't, just because Michigan and Ohio State are always a step ahead of them. Just like, even just game plan wise, like during games, it seems to happen where once the other team starts getting a roll with something, James Franklin can't catch up, and he's too late, and he's like, just everything is too late to even be there. Like, I mean, in last year against Ohio State, they could have beat Ohio State. They literally could have, and they had Ohio State. They had it in the bag. And then it just so happened where Sean Clifford made a few crucial mistakes, fumbling the ball and throwing a pick to JT Tomenlaw. But it's like, yeah, it's tough for Penn State. But I mean, yeah, I really don't know what to say about that.
But I mean, I like Penn State, and call me crazy. Don't get mad at me. But as of right now, I like Penn State over Ohio State in at the finish above Ohio State in the Big Ten East.
You're just spitting hot takes out.
I think Michigan's the team to beat, but I think right now, given Ohio State's uncertainty at quarterback right now,
we'll see. I mean,
I think it'll be close. Like I said, it all comes down to that game in Columbus. But I feel like I don't know, man. That's a tough division to predict other than Michigan. I feel like it's kind of wide open between the three.
Oh yeah, every year it's wide open between the three. And we talked about this last week with David Cohn about how literally you think about those three, they're always going to be at the top of the East. When you look at the West, every single year it's like a huge coin toss because
Yeah.
record wise, like a team could come out on top of the West, like Purdue last year with like
When's
five
the
losses.
last time the West has won a Big Ten championship?
I'm pretty sure it was Wisconsin back in
Who
probably
knows?
yeah, it's Wisconsin or it probably was Wisconsin. It had to have been, but yeah, it was quite a while ago. And I mean, Penn State won. They won the Big Ten back in. Let me just check just to be certain, but I think it was 2016 where they won the Big Ten championship. Actually, no, that's probably when they lost to Wisconsin. I'm not sure. Yeah, it was Wisconsin versus Penn State that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Wisconsin won. So no, Penn State won. Penn State won by 7. So I mean, they won one in 2016, but since then it's like,
Yeah.
what the? But I mean, I don't know if we really have much else to say about Penn State. It's just James Franklin kind of needs to flip the.
I think it all comes down to James Franklin. But and it comes down to the quarterback situation too. I mean, I think
it
they have
does.
their guy with Drew Aller. Like I said, it comes down to their weapons on offense. Can
But
they?
it really, compared to other schools, though, it really does come down to James Franklin. Like I think with other, like for you guys, like your season this year at Alabama does not come down to Nick Saban. It doesn't.
That's
Like
right.
like at Ohio State, it's not going to come down to Ryan Day. It's not going to come down to Jim Harbaugh.
Uh,
I mean, it could, but I think Penn State is the biggest what if coaching wise right now. It's between biggest coaching questions right now. It's between Penn State and Colorado because, like, who knows what's going to happen with Prime and who knows what's going to happen with James Franklin because James Franklin could be getting the boot. I don't think obviously Prime's not getting the boot right now. Like,
Deion Sanders going to Penn State next year. I was just kidding. But I like Penn State a lot this year. I think they are a sleeper. They're probably my like. If I had to pick a dark horse out of the Big Ten, it's probably Penn State. And I guess that's like a cheese like a vanilla dark horse. But I mean, either be them or Wisconsin. And as much as I like Wisconsin in the West, I still think they got a little bit more building to do under Luke Fickell. But I mean, I like Penn State. But like I said, or like you said, it comes down to James Franklin, and that's kind of where we're at with Penn State.
I would agree. So I mean, Penn State could win the West, but I mean, it's a big what if. It's a big what if for everybody, but I don't know. But
what I want to know is going into this next segment is what's going on with this list that ESPN made about the top 25 quarterbacks going into. I mean, of the 2000s. Okay, like
the list is whack.
It is. I wouldn't say it's whack. The big question mark to me is having Baker Mayfield number one.
You look at Baker.
Mayfield, yes, he won a Heisman, but he never even well he came close to going to a national championship
against Georgia.
But Sony Michel put that one out.
To me, it's just if you look at this list. So I'm going to just list off the top 10 really quick. Number 1, Baker. 2, Cam Newton. 3, Vince Young. 4, Tim Tebow. 5, Joe Burrow. 6, Deshaun Watson. 7, Kyler Murray. 8, Lamar Jackson. 9, Marcus Mariota. And 10, RG3. If you close out Baker, put your hand over Baker at number 1, the list looks great. But I still think
have some thoughts about Mariota and Robert Griffin being in the top
10. Numbering wise, I do too. But I don't think Baker should be that high. He could be in the top 10, but he might, like, to me, he didn't have that great of a career to be number 1. Cam Newton at 2. Cam Newton had a phenomenal career at Auburn. You look at who he had around him, he didn't really have much. Vince Young.
Tim Tebow, and I guess this is my bias because I always loved Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow should be number 1. 2 national titles. Not back to back, but a Heisman. You argue he could have won the Heisman a second time in 2009 had he beat Bama that year. But Cam Newton was just a freak of an athlete, and we were talking about this before the show. And people have seen this. I've seen it on Twitter and I've seen it on other social media platforms. But there was a stat or like something I don't remember where I saw it from, but it was like on that 2010 or that 2010 Auburn offense where they won the national title. Cam
The
Newton was
only
the only player drafted from that offense.
other than there was one offensive lineman that was later drafted, I'm pretty sure, or a UDFA. But like thinking about that, that's insane. Like that he was able to not single handedly, but really single handedly.
He had a lot to do with Auburn going 14-0 that year. I mean, he singly, I remember 2010 in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, down 28-0. No, 27-0. Because they won 28-27, down 27-0 to Alabama. And he just wills this comeback like I've never seen before. And Auburn ends up winning the game by 1 point. And he's a lot of the reason why, you take Cam Newton off that Auburn team, they probably go 6-6, 7-5, maybe. Vince Young had a lot to do with Texas. I like Vince Young. But one guy that I think should be on this list that isn't, you look at the top 25, the 25 that are on here, and I wasn't a big fan of Stetson Bennett, until
Not being on there.
well, in 2021 when Georgia won their first national title, was I was heavily praising the defense, because the defense is the reason they won a lot of their games. The offense was, the offense wasn't what was good. They had, they had Brock Bowers, they had George Pickens, they had, some other guys on offense that were pretty good. But man,
But I mean, Stetson still won back-to-back national championships.
Stetson put it into another gear this past year, and he did things that I never thought he was capable of doing. Like I was a huge critic of Stetson Bennett, even after they won the 2021 title, after they won the first title, because say what you want, but Bama should have won that title if it wasn't for Jameson Williams getting hurt. Bama wins that championship. I'm sorry. But no, even after they won the 2021 title, Stetson Bennett, I was very critical of Stetson Bennett, and he proved me dead wrong this year. He was a guy, David talked about it last week. Stetson Bennett was a straight out baller. I mean, he
100%.
he
Like,
whatever Wheaties he ate in the morning, it worked. And so Stetson Bennett was, he's just I like Stetson Bennett on this list. I think Stetson Bennett should be on this list.
He deserves to be in the top 25. You look at this list, very few of them are back-to-back national champions, let alone even national. Some of them never won a national championship.
Exactly.
And Stetson Bennett won it back-to-back years. And I know like there's some people can say like
back-to-back national titles should be on this list.
Exactly. Like Tim Tebow, I definitely think he should be a lot higher than Ford. Arguably, he's my number one too. I think he's up there between Vince Young and Burrow.
Cam.
And I mean, yeah, Cam too. Like the top 4 is really debatable. I think Baker should be out of the top 5. I think
Baker should be out of the top 10.
Like that's
me.
That's what I would think too. Lamar Jackson, I like him at 8. I think he could. Lamar Jackson's one of those pieces where he could be higher, but the thing is, he's not, just because he played at Louisville and didn't really able to bring that team to higher heights. But he was phenomenal. He was a athlete, just kind of like Cam Newton. Watched him on the field, and it's like, how the hell is he doing this? But then again,
Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Watson at Clemson was like, it was frustrating watching him and both of those national championships where Bama played Clemson and Deshaun Watson was the quarterback. They won Bama won the first one. Then the second year, you have the pick play to Hunter Renfrow with like 7 seconds left. But Deshaun Watson balled out in both those games, and Clemson doesn't win that national title in 2017 or 2016 without Deshaun Watson. And the same can be said for Trevor Lawrence. Dabo Swinney made the decision, and Trevor Lawrence's freshman season to switch from Kelly Bryant to Trevor Lawrence in the second game of the season. It worked out, and they beat the crap out of Alabama. But we don't speak about that too much. But
I was going to say,
the guy that should be up there.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is, what is he rated on this list? He is
11. I think Trevor Lawrence should be in the top 10.
There's one more play. Like, I know you can only have 10 guys in the top 10, and obviously there's a lot of good guys on this list, but I think another guy that got snubbed at 13 was Johnny Manziel. Like he was just, I know, like obviously his NFL career didn't pan out, but he was a different at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Everyone thought that he was going to be like the next generational talent in the NFL. Obviously, didn't pan out for Cleveland like at all.
Yeah.
Period. But like Johnny Manziel was insane to watch in college, and just like the kind of plays that he made and the athlete that he was too was. Like it may have not been on Cam Newton's level or Tim Tebow's or Deshaun Watson's or Trevor Lawrence's, but he was phenomenal and led that Texas A&M team to really big heights. But
Johnny Manziel was the quarterback I think that really made Nick Saban look in the mirror and say, "Hey, how come we don't have a guy like that? You know, how come And granted, he had AJ McCarron on the roster at the time, and AJ was great, but a couple years down the road, you started seeing Bama get these quarterbacks that can make type of plays like that, and you started and it also made Nick Saban kind of look in the. I think it was was the quarterback that really made Nick Saban look in the mirror and say, "Hey, we need to develop this type of offense because it's gonna catch up and bite us. Develop a type of offense where we could spread it out and throw it a lot more when we need to, and be exceptional throwing the football just as much as we are running the football." And so I feel like because I remember in that game 2012 when Johnny Manziel came to Tuscaloosa and did some unworldly things to beat Alabama. I just remember I remember being so defeated. Now, granted, Bama still won the national title that year, but I just remember like watching this kid, like who is this? Like,
yeah,
and they almost beat Alabama again the next year, but we beat them that year. We got revenge on them, but man,
I mean,
I think Johnny Manziel should be higher, but not maybe not top 10.
I think he should be higher than 13 though. But I mean, there's just you got to shift some guys around. I mean, I really don't know who he would necessarily be higher than, but I still think he deserves to be somewhat up.
I think Robert the Griffin. I think RG3 should be a little bit lower. I don't know. Yeah. It's a tough list. But it's a tough list. But the one thing that is for certain, or the two things that is for certain, that Baker Mayfield should not be one, and Stetson Bennett should be on this list somewhere.
Oh, 100%. And the funny thing to me about looking at this list, like if people just look at it, and we'll pull it up to throw a graphic on the screen, but it's like you look at the list, and like most of these guys, almost all of them, well, I literally think all of them made it to the NFL. But it's just crazy looking at college talent wise, like this list at like the top 10. And then you look at how they pan out in the NFL. Though I feel like to me, the only true one that is like proven to be an insane talent is Joe Burrow on this list. Cause then and I don't want to crap on these guys. I don't want to crap on Tim Tebow. Like Tim Tebow had a great career with the Broncos, just didn't work out for him. Baker Mayfield right now, number one on the list,
Rivers.
Potentially a backup for the Bucks. Then you think Vince Young, his NFL career didn't really pan out that well. Deshaun Watson right now, he's kind of in shambles after everything he did. Kyler Murray, yeah, still pretty good.
He allegedly did. He wasn't proven guilty now.
But Lamar Jackson, still love Lamar. He's good. Marcus Mariota, potential backup.
RG3 would have been great had he stayed healthy.
Exactly. If he stayed
healthy.
Andrew
Luck the same way. Andrew Luck was touted as the gold, the golden son, like the next coming of Christ. I mean, he was
exactly.
And I remember how hyped up Andrew Luck was coming out of college. Like
he was great, but I mean, the Colts offensive line.
The Colts replaced Peyton Manning for this dude.
Exactly.
And he would have been great had he stayed healthy. And then Trevor Lawrence is seeming to come along right now. But I mean, Phillip Rivers had a great career. He didn't win a Super Bowl, but he came close a couple times. And Carson Palmer had a great career. Case Keenum had one good year. Jameis Winston had a year we never seen before: 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions.
It's just looking at some of those names, though. It's just funny to me because I mean, and I trust
Jalen Hurts just made the Super Bowl.
Exactly, but I'm not saying I was saying more some of the guys in the top 10, top 15ish, but they had phenomenal college careers, and then just in the NFL, it panned out at first. But look at Cam Newton, doesn't even have a job now. Wants to.
But Cam was relevant for a lot of years, and Carolina, and same thing as Auburn. Carolina doesn't have the season they have that year without Cam.
No, I would 100% agree. I mean,
Now,
literally,
granted, my Broncos shut
yeah, I
that
know.
down real
Took down
quick in the
Cam
Super
Newton.
Bowl.
Yeah, literally.
Von Miller sent his career on a downward trend, but I mean, still, Cam was relevant for a lot of years. And I bang on Cam Newton a lot because I'm an Alabama fan. I still don't like Cam Newton because I'm an Alabama fan. But no, I mean, when it comes down to it, Cam was a phenomenal player, and I think he should be. I think he should be one or two. And then Tim Tebow should be one or two. I think that's my top two.
I would agree. I mean, I know you have a little bit of SEC bias, but I mean, I have to here too because Tim Tebow was literally like literally unreal at Florida, and
And I
watching,
think Cam Newton was behind Tim Tebow at Florida.
yeah, literally, and it's
We
insane.
we need the 30 for 30 on that 2008 Florida team.
It's coming, and I cannot.
Where you have Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, you have Percy Harvin, you have the Pouncey
Aaron
brothers, Aaron
Like,
Hernandez, Urban Meyer.
yeah, literally, like the most. Just thinking about those names on that team, it's insane. But yeah, absolutely crazy. But I mean, it's interesting to see this list now and then think about future wise, like who of the future of these recruiting classes will be in like say top 25 quarterbacks like from 2020 on.
Caleb Williams will be on this list next year. If they make this list next year.
Yeah, Caleb Williams will definitely be on that list. I'm waiting for them to make a receiver list and put my boy Marvin Harrison Jr. on it and all Ohio State receivers ever on the list. So
It'll be a bunch of Ohio State and Bama receivers.
Ohio State, Bama, and LSU receivers for sure. But
and probably all the list would consist of for real because
maybe a couple Penn State guys, maybe. But
if you're talking about 2000s, I mean,
there's not really many crazy.
You have Calvin Johnson. You have Calvin Johnson had a phenomenal college career. I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that
I can't go too in depth right now on this. I'm not too ready for that. But no, I would definitely agree though. But yeah, that list was Baker at number one though is just freaking questionable, man. Like what could have been.
Even like when we had a big game Boomer on a few weeks ago. I don't even think he would have Baker Mayfield at number one.
Oh, he definitely wouldn't. He wouldn't. And sometimes
because he knows that.
Yeah, he fell short and just but it's interesting to see lists like this and interesting.
This is like actual like ESPN, like this ain't even big game members list. This is ESPN that the experts,
the experts came together to make this list and probably all voted upon guys. And because it's not like we'll see. But
one thing about Phillip Rivers being on this list, what did Phillip Rivers do at NC State? Is what I want to know. Like, I guess because Phillip Rivers was in the NFL, but before I even really started watching football, I guess. So,
that would make sense why we don't really know kind of what happened. But I know he was like a top 5 draft pick back in the early 2000s. I mean, obviously, but
yeah.
He was drafted by the Giants too. I forgot about that.
And Eli was originally drafted by the Chargers.
Yep. And then because at the time people would. At
the time the Chargers still had Drew Brees on the roster.
Yep. And it's crazy to think about that.
Hey, talk about Drew Brees and the Dolphins. Like Drew Brees is the domino that let Nick Saban come to Alabama. If Nick Saban gets Drew Brees at Miami, I don't know if he ever comes to Alabama.
Probably not, but
that's
big what
if. That's like a what if scenario.
So let's do it. All right, but I don't know if we really have much else to dick around about, but it was interesting to talk a little bit about Penn State and talk about just the potential future with James Franklin, Drew Allar, and their defense and everything that Penn State's produced. And it's still kind of everything's nil. It means nothing because they always come up short.
Yeah.
But
it was fun discussing this list as well because a lot of these guys we grew up watching, we remember how great they were. And this it kind of gives me a little bit of nostalgia more than anything because you think about it, Baker Mayfield, even though he's number one, it doesn't seem like he played that long ago. But he did. It's almost like 10 years, almost like 5 years now, 5 or 6 years. So it's it's just insane to think about that and think about how old we're getting. And like Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud are on this list. They just got drafted. So I mean,
Oh yeah, but crazy list, but yeah, that was a blast discussing that.
And yeah, that'll do it for this episode, man. We want to have a huge thank you to our new sponsors, 251 Pool Works and Now Fitness. With Corey Creighton. I didn't mention his name. I didn't mention his name in the beginning because for some reason I didn't think about it. But those two sponsors, we can't be more thankful to them for contributing and helping us grow, and we're gonna help them grow. And so, like I said, we're a huge thanks to them. Huge thanks to everybody that watched this. Last week's episode was our highest viewed episode
ever. Yes,
ever. So it's only up from here, man. It's only up from here.
100%. But thank you guys. This is episode 12 of Back the End Zone. We're out, and we'll see you next week.